Dr. Grip, are you ready, sir?
Yes. Can you hear me?
All right.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen and give you a brief presentation tonight on the redistricting analysis for the Plainfield School District. So let's start with this. So the purpose of this study was to do a complete district-wide analysis of redistricting of the Plainfield elementary schools. And really the purpose for this was twofold. It was to help relieve the overcrowding that exists in many of the elementary schools, as well as to maximize the use of the new elementary school coming online, which is Booker. So it's more of a two-stage process trying to do two different things at once. The Plainfield administration provided us proposed boundaries of what the new elementary school zones would look like. So I'd like to just thank them for providing us that, because it's a very challenging project to be able to come up with boundaries that might be able to balance out the enrollments across the school district. Once they gave us those proposed elementary school zones, we tweaked them to try to further reduce overcrowding in some of the schools and to increase enrollment at Booker. But the starting place of the zones were from the school district administration. So one thing that we wanted to look at from our perspective was, we have students in your school district that are attending a different school for elementary school than what they're zoned to be going to. In other words, they live in a particular zone such as Barlow, but they don't actually go to the Barlow school. They go to one of the other schools within the school district. So what you're seeing right here is a table that shows how many students actually go to their, what we call the home school, the school that they're actually zoned to. So for Barlow, 77% of the students who live in the Barlow attendance area actually attend their school, but 23% don't. So if you go down this list, one of the biggest ones that do not have a lot of students going to their home schools is Stillman. About 44% of the students who live in that zone do not go to Stillman. So here's what your existing boundaries look like. We created a map showing all the elementary attendance areas existing as we speak right now in 22-23 school year. And we geocoded all the students' addresses for elementary school onto this map. So any dot that you see here stands for an elementary school student only. There's no middle school or high school students on this map. So here's what the proposed new boundaries look like. And the one I want to focus on is Booker, which is the green area right here in the center of the map. And you can see that that takes a lot of students who were attending Cook, and to some extent, some students in Emerson, Barlow, Evergreen, a lot in Evergreen, as well as Stillman. So when you look at this picture, you might say to yourself, well, you know, can you be a little more specific of the areas that would change zones? And the next diagram is just that. So if we were to do more or less take the first map, which is your existing boundaries, and overlay it with the proposed boundaries, anything that's coming up with a crosshatch here is actually an area of students who are changing schools. So if you look at this, the area, of course, that's changing the most is right over here in the center of the map, where Cook, Evergreen, Barlow, and to some extent over here Stillman would be going to Booker. There are other areas that we had to make some changes as well. You can see over in Clinton and Washington, so on, in Cedar Brook, so on and so forth. And that was done to relieve overcrowding in some of those schools and to shift them over into the neighboring elementary attendance area boundaries. So the question then becomes, how many students will this really affect in your district? Well, there's about 4,400 elementary students in the district. So this table is showing you the current enrollment as of last October, that based on the enrollment from the Department of Education in each one of the schools. And in the proposed scenario, how many students would actually have to switch schools? And we're talking about somewhere roughly about 1,000 students. Roughly about 20, almost 1/4 of your elementary student population is going to have to shift. The biggest impact is really at Evergreen, as you saw from that previous map, because a lot of that attendance area boundary does encompass Evergreen. So once we did those particular maps, we want to see how this new boundary is not only going to impact you currently, but how will it impact you in 5 years from now? So what we did is we projected the enrollments in each one of these schools for the next 5 years based upon the new boundaries. And what we did is we took your student addresses from the last 5 years and we pin mapped them, or what's called geocoded, into a program called ArcGIS. And we then tabulated the number of students who would have resided in the new elementary attendance areas in the last 5 years for the purpose of projecting enrollment. So in other words, we're almost doing a simulation showing if the new boundaries had been in effect 5 years ago, this is how many students would have been in the schools historically over the last 5 years. And then we use something called the cohort survival ratio method to project what it would be into the future. So this methodology is assuming that each student is going to attend their home school in the future. And as I showed you first thing tonight, that has not been the case, at least in the 22-23 school year. So for this plan to work, the students who are residing in a particular zone are going to have to go to their home school. So this might be one of the more important charts of tonight. And what it shows is each school and what their capacity is plus 10%. This is from the school district's architect. It's called the Facility Efficiency Standards Capacity plus 10%. And this is showing you what the enrollment is compared to capacity right now. If you see a negative value in here in what's called the status quo column, that is saying that you don't have enough seating. So almost all of the elementary schools, except for Cook, have a shortage of seating right now. So that's why you really need a new school to come online. Overcrowding is for sure. So with Booker coming online and using the proposed scenario and now looking out 5 years, how does that change things? Well, a lot of those negatives have now turned to positives, which means you will have surplus seating in those buildings. There will still be 3 buildings that will have a shortage of seating. That would be Barlow, Cedar Brook, and Stillman. But to be honest with you, they're really, maybe Stillman's a little bit on the higher side, but Barlow and Stillman are not very high in terms of having what's called inadequate seating or unhoused students. You certainly should be able to accommodate those students without any major difficulties. So with that, again, a very brief presentation. I will open it up to the board for questions.
I got a quick question. May I be recognized by Madam President?
Go ahead.
So in terms of the 5-year projection, what's the margin of error associated with that?
That's a good question. So this is a projection by school. So when we look at a district-wide, the margin of error is 1% per year. So if you were to look at this and aggregate all the elementary school enrollments, it would be 5% error rate in the 5th year of the projection period.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions from commissioners? No more questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.